Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to the November
Oh,
21st,
not working.
2023 meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. The commission members rather are appointed by the select board to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town bylaw governing the wetlands. As a matter of formality, we have 2 points of order. One of them is that we always introduce ourselves, which we will in a moment. The second is that we invite the public to speak during a hearing, although for purposes of this evening, I want to remind the public that last Tuesday, the 14th, at our public hearing, we closed the hearing on the Guile Road discussion of the artificial turf field. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to continue the discussion and deliberation and vote on that. And that discussion and deliberation will be conducted by the commission members only. The public has had, I've lost count of the number of meetings, but we started last March, I think, with public hearings, and we've had a number of them, at least one a month, and we've had a site visit as well. So that we've entertained a great deal of information, some robust discussion. 99% of it was articulate, persuasive, substantive, and we're very grateful for it. To review the history, this is a proposal. It's called a notice of intent, which asks the commission to issue a permit to allow the construction of a artificial turf field at the Lower Guile Road near the high school. That field that currently exists, it's a grass field. The field joins the wetlands, and it's very close to Pine Tree Brook, which is a perennial stream, which has significance to us in terms of jurisdiction. Because of the fact that there were certain technical issues that were being presented to us, the commission exercised its right and authority, in some cases an obligation, to seek expert help. And pursuant to the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G, we retained an expert in the areas of environmental, hydrological, and civil engineering, so that we could actually answer some of the questions that we could not ourselves answer. So we put out a proposal at the very beginning of July, and that went to 5 vendors. The one vendor that responded with a proposal was Tetra Tech. And I want the public to know, and for the commission members, I want to review what our 10 questions were that we sought assistance for. The first one was whether the presence of PFAS or PFOs in the proposed plastic material of the artificial turf would adversely impact nearby Pine Tree Brook and or the adjacent BVW, that's bordering vegetated wetland. This analysis should include the potential for A, micro-shedding of plastic fibers from the field surface, B, any chemical contamination from the adhesives used in connecting the sections of the surface matting, the surface mat itself, or the bedding beneath the surface layer by means of surface water, sheet flow, or by water draining through the pervious top layer, which is designed to be captured by the ridge drains beneath the field surface. That's a long question, but we're trying to figure out if there's a contaminant potential. Second question, if such contamination is probable, can the impact be quantified so as to measure the adverse impact compared to 1, ambient levels of PFAS or PFOs, measured in both liquids, that is adjacent waterways, and surrounding soil levels? Number 3, if there is a net increase in contamination levels, is it cumulative or will it degrade and dissipate over time, including the issue of dilution into the adjacent waterways? Next question. Can any contaminants captured in the drainage system be mitigated by installing a filtration system prior to the water entering Pine Tree Brook? Number 5, does the organic wood-based bedding for the field contain any wood preservatives that have the potential for migration to the adjacent Pine Tree Brook? Number 6, what is the impact of potential field surface temperatures on the water that discharges into Pine Tree Brook? And will that impact affect the Pine Tree Brook temperatures and ultimately impact the Neponset River temperature? Will that potential change adversely impact any cold water fisheries? 7, can the discharged water be detained prior to discharge to Pine Tree Brook in order to allow it to return to ambient temperature? 8, do licensed site disposal facilities currently exist to allow the town to safely recycle the plastic turf materials? Number 9, if the field needs to be removed and replaced in the future, will there remain residual contamination in the soils beneath the surface field mat? If so, is there a mechanism for removing such residual contamination? 10, what are the appropriate EPA and DEP hazard and/or health indices to be utilized in our analysis? How do the projected numbers how do the projected numbers for this project compare to the government health and hazard indices? That was the charter for Tetra Tech, and through the person of Sean Reardon and Ron Wyrick, we received a number of reports back from Tetra Tech. And rather than go over the 10 questions, I can summarize, I think, appropriately into 3 silos. We had temperature as being one big silo of questions. And the answer was that the temperature will not impact Pine Tree Brook. And there are several reasons for it, and there are several design implementations and revisions, actually, that will ensure that there will be no temperature change impacting Pine Tree Brook. The second was PFAS. Are there PFAS and PFOs that will shed from the plastic materials? And the answer is essentially no. This particular product has been tested, not by Tetra Tech, but by a federally licensed lab, Alpha Labs, at another project. And the indicators in that test done at the federal lab indicates that the numbers of PFAS were below the detectable level and below the current levels, which is called the hazard index, which is currently 20 parts per trillion. And not only is below that, but it's below the anticipated new number of 4 parts per trillion that we expect the EPA to produce and the DEP to reflect in its standards, which will be 4 parts per trillion. All of the chemical analysis suggests that the numbers would be well below the 4 parts per trillion. Currently, there's testing soils. Some of the soils currently contain higher levels of PFAS and PFOS, but that would not be an alteration. And in fact, when the field is placed, if it is placed, the topsoil is going to be removed to place the bedding and the top surface mat. With respect to, there's another component in addition to the PFAS and PFOS and chemical components. There was a question of what about the plastic? Is there going to be any micro shedding from the plastic fibers? We went back to Tetra Tech and said, do you have any recommendations as to how to refine and revise the plan that was submitted by Chris Huntress on behalf of the Parks Department? And there were revisions made so that currently all of the water from the surface of the field will drain through the field, be captured in ridge drains, and those ridge drains will discharge into a stone trench that runs the length of the field. Again, after that, to ensure that, and there are 3 series of filter fabrics that will capture any plastic, any kind of debris, actually, whether it's leaves or pine needles or whatever, but would certainly capture plastics as well. In addition, there is a second wave of filtration beyond the 3 filtration fibers, and there are 3 sump pumps that have been established, so that if anything were to get through the 3 layers of fibers, it would be captured in the sump, and the sump is actually reachable, and it would be incumbent upon us to ensure that there is an operations and maintenance plan to ensure that those are kept in a clean state so that nothing discharges into the wetlands. Now, key to the revision to the plan was that the direct discharge by pipe into Pine Tree Brook was revised. And rather than putting the water into the brook, it's being put into the trench, which will discharge into the wetlands. And the water moves very slowly through the wetlands, which will function as a filter in order to ensure that A, there's no plastic, B, any chemical contaminants would be filtered there as well. So they answered our questions in those areas. So the question before us, and I know there's been healthy debate about this, and experts were heard and listened to, and there are some folks that feel that those filtration systems would not be sufficient. Our job tonight is to determine whether or not this plan, as revised, is in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act, and is it in compliance with the Milton Town Wetlands Bylaw. As a matter of setting and posing the question and sort of setting the scene, I suggest that the easiest way and the most direct way to do this would be to have a proposal to issue the permit and then discuss what conditions would be necessary and appropriate to make sure that the plan complies with the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town Bylaw. That's simply it's positing the question. It's putting the issue on the table. So pursuant to that, I would suggest this, that I will make a motion to issue an order of conditions, and that's just a technical term for a permit, to allow the field to be installed at the Lower Guile Road field. And then I would invite comments from each and every commissioner as to, and you don't have to say yay or nay yet, because the motion hasn't been completed. It will require some very significant and very detailed special conditions. And probably the most efficient way to start is that Hans Van Lingen has done yeoman's service and has gone out to look for other conservation commissions and see what they did. And by the way, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the Martha's Vineyard field and how the permit was denied and it's involved in litigation. I want folks to know that if we're looking for precedent, the Martha's Vineyard Conservation Commission approved the field. They voted in favor of it. Rather than look there, Hans has gone out and looked at the town of Wayland and has analyzed very, very significant conditions. And I've asked Hans to address those conditions because that is the way that we're going to formulate eventual motion. Right now, we're going to start with a general proposition that there is a move to allow the field. And Hans, could you address what you believe to be appropriate special conditions?
Sure. Just I would need to have control of the screen. Also, Tom Palmer, can you mute yourself, please? Tom?
Am I making noise?
Yeah, there's significant background noise, and it's really distracting.
Okay, Sean, can you allow Hans to share the screen? Philip, you want to try again? Are you there, Philip?
Yeah, he's muted.
How about, apparently there's another host. Is that 5? Zoom 5? Sean, did you say?
Hi, sorry,
Yeah,
it's me.
That's Philip.
Sorry.
All right.
All right. I can make Hans a co-host. Will that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, Hans, you should be a co-host.
Yep. Can you see my screen? Hopefully you
Yes,
can.
Hans, thank you very much.
So, yeah, so the conditions I pulled from are a combination of standard conditions that should be associated with most projects, as well as those associated with the project in Wayland that I saw as a reference. That project was somewhat similar to this one in that it involved work in the wetland buffer. Wayland has a 30-foot no disturb. Milton has a 25-foot no disturb. For that project, there was proximity to a vernal pool, which is different from this project, but I made sure to scrub the conditions, anything related to that. And just to try to ensure that the appropriate compliance measures are met prior to, during, and after construction. So there's conditions that I've suggested in here that are that we're going to ask the applicant or the Parks Department to provide prior to the start of construction, certain compliance documentation and information on the construction contractor, certain deliverables during, certain things to meet prior to the start of construction, including installation of erosion controls, confirmation of the limits of work, those sort of things, which are fairly standard conditions. And then some monitoring and inspection requirements during construction, and there's some post-construction aspects in perpetuity. And I drafted this fairly, based on the information I had. So, did the best I could. So I welcome input from other commissioners on what we have here. So condition 1, again, this is one of the more standard conditions, requiring that a site meeting be held with the agent of the commission, and just establishing what the contractor applicant is required to provide prior to the start of construction, what sort of deliverables. One thing that it identifies is any additional permits that are required. That includes building or electrical permits or other approvals required by the town. It also requires that the EPA construction general permit, which is more commonly known as the NIPDES permit, be obtained, and we be provided with a copy of the stormwater pollution prevention plan (SWIP) prior to the start of construction. The special condition 2, prior to the commencement of any work under the permit, the order of conditions shall be filed with the registry of deeds that's required for any project, or required under order of conditions. I already mentioned that the EPA permit. The applicant in this case, or the contractor, will provide contact information prior to the commencement of work. The conservation agent will inspect the sediment barriers. One thing, this is something that I've asked to be added, is that we be provided a construction phasing plan to understand the manner in which the site's going to be cleared. It also and how the road will be constructed. In addition to that, we asked to identify any stockpile areas or where storage. Essentially, this is to ask that the site be maintained in an appropriate and orderly fashion, and that construction proceed in an orderly fashion, and that the contractor is able to demonstrate that they have the ability to do that. The order of condition prevails where there's a difference between any contract provisions and the order of conditions. The permit is the governing document. Standard stop work orders, maintenance of erosion controls, standard language. Dewatering, given the proximity of the project to wetlands and the current concerns about high water levels, there is a chance that dewatering may be required at some point during construction. If that's the case, there's a requirement in here that explains what the contractor is supposed to do to comply with that requirement and what they need to demonstrate before they can start doing that. So if they're going to be digging a trench and the trench is full of water and they want to take that water and put it somewhere else, they got to talk to us first, and they have to demonstrate that they have the appropriate permits and controls in place before they do that. Demolition, that really refers to the access road and ensuring that the materials associated with the access road are managed appropriately, and that if there's any disposal of material, it's done in accordance with any regulations. Same thing applies to backfill. Any clean fill being brought on site, making sure that that's done appropriately. If for any reason there's any potentially contaminated material identified during construction, not that we think there is or there would be, it just includes a requirement of how that be managed. Eradication of invasive plants, if knowing that there's significant invasives along the access road and at the edge of the vegetation at the lower part of the field, if the applicant chooses to do some control of that invasives, it helps to define how that be done. A couple of the important aspects that need to be maintained throughout construction: the understanding what the limit of work is, landscaping requirements, stormwater management. I mentioned care of stockpile materials. Refueling, this is one that John Kiernan loves to include in any order of condition, is to make sure that any refueling or equipment storage is done outside of wetlands and buffers. Site stabilization during construction, given we don't know what time of year exactly the construction is going to start. If construction begins and needs to be stopped for more than 2 weeks, there are stabilization requirements. This is consistent with the NIPD's requirements under the stormwater pollution prevention plans. This isn't something that's different. It's just reminding the applicant of what the construction requirements under NIPD's are. Lighting. The lighting should be consistent with the plans that have been put forward. Downward facing lighting, and I still need to check what the exact language is that's put forth in the plans, but I would suggest making it consistent with that. In the winter, turf fields shall not be plowed or either mechanical methods or hand shoveling. The reason I said that is because any plowing or shoveling or mechanical movement of snow would result in likely lifting up the materials, and the only place to put that snow would be in the wetlands. So we don't want to have discharge of materials in the wetlands as a result of shoveling or plowing.
Hans, could I hold you there just for a minute? Because
Sure.
At the last meeting, there was a question from one of the neighbors about some kind of de-icing potential, and no, to my mind, I've never heard of that, but we could add something right there that there'll be no mechanical methods or hand shoveling or chemical ice melt used. I've never heard of anybody doing that, but it was a question, so it would be easy enough to put in right there that there shall be no de-icing chemical components utilized.
Yeah, I have de-icing covered under the access roadway, but I'll fix that. I'll make sure that gets
Thank you.
added. One thing that is important is the final operation and maintenance plan to the conservation department, so we understand what the operation and maintenance requirements are, keeping up with this sort of field, and understanding what the expectations are to ensure that the life of the field is what is being meets the greatest extent possible what's been communicated by the applicant, and that we won't see ourselves in a situation where due to a lack of operation and maintenance that the life of the field is reduced. Completion of the project, these are pretty standard. Relevant to soil stabilization, rumen and erosion controls, notice of completion. Here are some of the conditions that are anticipated to be in perpetuity. So no expansion of the project within the 25 foot no disturbance zone. That's standard. Litter removal, provide litter barrels, collect waste generated by users, spectators, turf field. I kind of added that, just it seemed appropriate. Here's where the prohibitive chemical de-icing salts into this condition. So I'll modify this to be to mirror what it says further up. And then the lawn fertilizer, herbicide, insecticides, that's pretty standard language. Here is the conditions to be met prior to commencing permitted work. So here's the mark out requirements prior to start of construction, laying out where the 25 no disturb, where the wetland flags are, and any appropriate controls. The entire site, the limits of work should be laid out and staked in the field under the supervision of a PE, professional engineer, professional land surveyor, and to verify that the limit of work is consistent with the approved plans. Sorry, let me fix this. So this kind of reiterates the previous. I could even delete this one if you think. It says prior to the commencement of work on site, copy of the manufacturer's specification regarding installation, care, maintenance, the infill, and artificial grass. I think that may be covered, but I wasn't really sure. Now, here's where the reporting requirements that I think are appropriate to be included. So I think it's appropriate to have at least one on-site inspection every 30 days that thoroughly reviews the status of the project, making sure that the stormwater management system, the status of the installation, the overall condition of the site, the work is being done in compliance with the permit. That needs to be signed by both the inspector, who I believe should be a PE, as well as the on-site, the OPM, the on-site project manager or site supervisor, to ensure that they both are confirming that the work is proceeding in accordance with the requirements. Requiring that the report be submitted in 5 business days of the inspection. And it just specifies what the standard language in the report needs to include. If the permit requires to be extended, the application should be in before at least 30 days prior to the expiration date. The permit does not relieve the applicant of any other complying with any other permit requirements. I think that, sorry, this one might be duplicative about the source of backfill, that'd be clean. 39 talks about tracking of soils on the streets, paved roads, making sure that that's a general requirement under the NIPD's stormwater pollution, but it's one that's important for track out or maintaining or ensuring that the site is being maintained in a clean and appropriate manner. There are a number of catch basins, or there are catch basins in the vicinity of the project. The applicant or the contractor should clearly identify the location of the catch basins and make sure that they're appropriately protected during construction. This speaks about the sediment controls. So failure of road conditions and all related statutes shall be deemed to cause to revoke or modify the permit. So basically, the permit is void if work proceeds in not in compliance with the permit. This adds information or clarity on the dewatering requirements and what the appropriate permit is associated with that. Here's information on soil stockpiling or other materials, construction materials, and where they would need to be. This might be duplicative again, refueled or service within 100 foot. And now here's site-specific conditions. Disturbed and exposed areas brought to final finished grade, stabilized, loam and seed, standard conditioned. Here's where prior to the construction of the turf field, I'd like to get a sampling plan for surface water sampling, and then ultimately turning that into later stormwater discharge sampling. So I'm not sure exactly which chemicals we want to analyze for, but I welcome input from other commissioners on that. This next two conditions talk about the what the post-construction sampling is, what the requirements are, basically within 72 hours of any rain event that is greater than 2.5 inches over 24 hours. So it would be a significant rain event that would trigger the need for sampling. And condition 51 establishes what the not only the baseline, but what applicable state standard that can be compared to. This should all be included. So 52 speaks to a plan to monitor any migration of infill material, synthetic grass into wetland buffers and associated wetland resource areas. Management of excess material, excavated material. Again, speaking to the, if there's any contamination found, lighting on the field shall be turned off when each evening when the activity in the field has ceased, so that to eliminate any excess dark sky issues. Final operation and maintenance plan requirement, and then these are the conditions for requesting a certificate of compliance with the project. So covered a lot, and I welcome comments.
Now, what about in the monitoring? If there are, let's take plastic, for example. What happens if there's an excessive amount of plastic recovered or not cleaned up? Is there a requirement here for a corrective action plan?
Yes. In the event the screens are clogged with infill materials, synthetic grass, the applicant shall evaluate methods to control migration of infill material or synthetic grass blades. Recommendation shall be submitted to the commission for review and approval within 90 days of the observation.
That's item number 51, Hans, is that the one?
52 talks about the infill material or migration of plastics. 51 is the stormwater sampling and the comparison to.
Oh, Hans, I just figured it out. I'm looking at what you emailed. So
Yeah,
this has
sorry.
been updated since then. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, so old 51 corresponds to new what?
52. Yeah,
52.
two conditions under the same line before, so that's why.
That item, do you want to specify where the sampling should occur?
So that I assume that would be under the plan requirement. So the
Okay.
applicant would submit a plan that would indicate where that would occur, and so we would concur or accept the plan as submitted, provided.
Okay, so we don't have that yet. Oh, two considerations, right? One, that it is the most appropriate place, and two, that all of the testing is done consistently from at the same location.
Exactly. And that's where I'm putting it on the applicant to submit a plan that the commission would accept.
I see.
I think it's important that we would make sure that that sampling and monitoring is done by a neutral party. And that there is a funding source to pay for that service.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and it's the town, and if the town submits the plan and the plan requires some testing, sometimes I wonder what a neutral party is, but it would probably have to go out to bid, and it would be somebody that would be I guess the lowest responsible bidder to do that has the capacity to perform those tests. But you're right, the town would be the obligee, so to speak, to pay the cost of the testing.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add, I concur with Wendy on this. I had among my notations for our deliberations, the establishment under the auspices or through the auspices of the Conservation Commission, an annual external third-party monitoring of the Lower Gull Road area wetland, beginning with a benchmarking, and I think this is something that Hans suggested, that it be benchmarked from where it is before any work be done. So that we have those current conditions and can measure them. And this would be for following any measurable direct adverse impact on the wetland, or improvements for that matter. Cut both ways, adjusted for climate change effect.
So one thing I just have some concern about is having these things be in perpetuity. I think we should define if it, at a minimum 3 years post-construction, and then allow for a determination after that to cease if we see that there's not an impact, or things are working as they should.
I think it should be in perpetuity as long as the field is being used.
Yeah, I concur
And
with
we're
that.
requiring them to adhere to an operation and management plan. We need to make sure that in fact that is being adhered to.
And I also don't want to lose sight of mention of the fact that any changes have to take into account climate change effects. So there's a smoothing, if you will, of the measure that occurs.
Can you restate that, Arthur? I didn't know what you meant. I didn't know what you meant by smooth.
We can anticipate over time that climate changes are going to have an impact. And what we want to do is make sure that we're looking at the measures outside of any climate change impact on the wetland, so that we're really measuring with respect to the project.
Understood. Thank you.
Sorry, I was ambiguous about that.
It might make sense to incorporate this into the larger monitoring program that the Neponset River Watershed Association has been doing for decades. I would love it if we could compensate them for the monitoring that they might continue here at this site, and maybe expand upon the work that they're doing to include the alterations that are being proposed here.
Yeah, I'm not sure we could force the applicant
No.
to do that.
You want the town to pay Neponset River.
We might, that's something we could ask if they would consider.
Well, I'm guessing that it would cost the Neponset River Watershed Association a lot less to do the monitoring than if it was parceled out to a consulting firm.
Economies of scale, you're probably 100% correct, and that would be a great party to include among the request for proposal.
And then
If
we
they
would
would have
also
the
be able to
expertise-
compare historic data as well, which would be really valuable.
That, I agree with that.
Could we speak more about the corrective action plan? I think those are the words that you had used, John, that if we find through the monitoring that that the water quality standards are not being upheld, what is going to happen?
Well, let's just take as an example, you know, you would expressed a concern with plastic getting into the wetlands, and the plan was to put in these 3 fiber barriers and also the sump pump, so that if the fibers, I mean, if the filters, fiber filters, were not stopping it, then a corrective plan would be, so well, if that's not stopping it, we've got to change the size of the openings in the fiber fabric. That would be an example. So that if it wasn't capturing all of the plastic, if there is any plastic, I don't know that there is. You know, our consultant has said that there won't be any, but let's say there were, hypothetically. And if it didn't capture it all in the fiber fabric, then we could change the specifications for the fiber fabric. Or if it wasn't captured in the sump, or if the sump was filling up too quickly, we could change the O&M plan to check it every week instead of every month. That kind of corrective action.
Right.
But I also see a failure to achieve any of the standards required under the plan would essentially equate to a violation of the order of conditions.
Mhm. And then at that point, would all use of the field stop until corrective action was implemented?
I'd say we would follow the appropriate enforcement levels associated with a violation of conditions. So, I mean, if the commission deemed it appropriate to halt all activities, if the impact were that severe, then it seems it would be within the commission's jurisdiction. Otherwise, you know, there are other projects. There's levels between that and a nasty letter. So I think it would depend on the impact and you know what the result was.
But could we make a decision on that action now as part of this order of conditions, rather than waiting for future commissioners to decide what an appropriate action would be? For example, could we put language into this order of conditions that states that if the water quality standards for these things that we're specifying are not met, that use of the field would cease until these actions were remedied?
Again, I think it would be dependent on the circumstance. So, you know, if you have an anomalous sampling event, and you know, I wouldn't see that as justification to issue a cease and desist on all use of the fields. So, you know, I think there's, again, going back to what I said, I think there's levels of severity between, you know, what an exceedance is and the amount of time between when the issue can be rectified. If it can't be rectified, then maybe that is the result in action. But no, I don't see it necessary to immediately jump to that level of response.
My concern is that these it takes so much time for actions to take place through the public process. And in the meantime, the brook is going to continue to get polluted. And frankly, I'm very uncomfortable with that thought.
If I can go to Hans's point, it really does depend upon the problem, because if what you're talking about is the brook getting polluted and there was no other corrective action that could be done immediately, like clean out the sump, then ceasing use of the field might be appropriate. But if the sump was filled up because somebody forgot to clean it out last week, then you don't have to stop the use of the field to have somebody from, and I won't pick on DPW, but it would be Parks or somebody to go down, because Parks is responsible for it, to send a person down to clean it out. And that's easy. So I think, you know, you're trying to come up with a solution before you've identified the problem. If it were actually polluting the brook, that would be a different scenario. That would be much more serious and would require or warrant a more serious sanction. But if it's just somebody didn't clean it out frequently enough and the sump filled up, then you just clean it out. You wouldn't have to stop use of the field to have somebody get down and clean it out.
But John, if we're not finding out that the filters in the trenches and everything else aren't being cleared out until we see a water quality sample a month or even a year later that shows that there's plastic and pollutants in the brook, it's too late at that point.
Oh, I agree with you, but the operation and maintenance plan has a requirement that the monitoring be much more frequent than an annual basis. I mean, they're going to be down there all the time on the O&M plan.
So is that a monthly thing, John?
Yeah, wasn't that, I thought the monitoring and reporting was monthly.
I
don't
thought it
have
was
the number
two,
in
but I'm
front of
not
me.
sure.
Hans, you might know. I believe it's monthly.
So during
Okay.
construction, there's a monthly reporting requirement. Post-construction, so it's event-based. And so the reason I had it event-based is because, as Mr. Hunter said, based on their stormwater calculations, for the most part, the field itself will allow for infiltration into the ground directly without requiring overflow into the adjacent stormwater system or the conveyance pipes. And Mr. Huntress, if I'm wrong in what I'm saying, just maybe indicate in the chat. And so this would really be looking at overflow or discharge beyond the capacity of the infiltration system, that allowing the water to go directly into the grounds, which that means that going back to Arthur's point, you know, with climate change, we could have these sort of rain events repeatedly for 3 months straight, and we would have to do repeated sampling under those conditions.
So I guess I'm confused. So during construction, it's a monthly readout and report, testing readout report, and then post-construction, it's event-based.
Exactly.
It seems like it, I guess my view is that it should have a consistent time element to it as a monthly.
If there's
I
no
agree. At least
discharge,
monthly.
if there's no discharge of water, there's nothing to sample from the stormwater system.
But my understanding is that we're sampling from the wetlands and the Neponset River.
So
Is that not correct?
the baseline would be at the surface sampling, would be at surface water sampling locations. The discharge, maybe in this case, if you rather that this be clarified, I'd welcome some input on it. It's just a first shot at me trying to put it together. So
Yeah, no, I understand. I think we're talking about two different things, and maybe we need both.
Mhm.
So again, just to reiterate, according to the stormwater design, the most of the stormwater and lighter events will be infiltrated directly into the ground, according to according to Mr. Hunter. So it's only in the extreme events that the water will convey to the pipes and discharge beyond the field itself. So that's what I'm trying to capture, because that's the water that'll be potentially leaving the site, being discharged into the infiltration trench along the wetlands. If there's additional surface water quality that sampling that you'd like to see, I think that's something that should be specified if you want to provide language for that.
Hans, on this point, do we not want to be explicit about the monitoring process being employed to see if there is any adverse impact on the wetland, and explicitly stated as such?
Say it again, Arthur, please.
Have the monitoring system, part of the function of the monitoring system, determine whether or not through measurement processes, whether or not there's any adverse impact on the wetland. And that gets back to the notion of having a benchmark or a baseline from the outset. And then over time, you can determine a number of things, one of which is whether the wetland itself is the same as it was for the baseline, is better, or has experienced some adverse impact.
So you're looking to establish whether there's an adverse impact to the wetlands following construction.
Yes.
Right. That's what I was getting at as well. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't articulate it as well as Arthur did.
If that's the case, I mean, that would be something that would need to be done by an ecologist or a wetland scientist. It wasn't really what I was contemplating here. This was really looking at the chemical content of stormwater and whether or not the stormwater system was effectively catching whatever materials may or may not be shed or discharged. Mr. Huntress did note in the chat that the catch basins do have a quarterly inspection requirement under the O&M plan. So that would probably be a good inspection frequency for monitoring for the plastics or any filtration devices.
Arthur, this might be just semantics here, but I thought that Hans's suggestion to have a baseline and then periodic monitoring was to determine whether or not there's some increase in chemical contaminants, if any. But you translated that into adverse impact. Aren't we talking about the same thing? If you've got a baseline of 2 and then you do a sampling and it's 4, you can call that an adverse impact, or you can call it an increase of 2. Either one of them is going to require corrective action.
They maybe if
I think Hans has it right.
What's that? Todd, say again.
No, I said, I agree with the way Hans has it. I mean, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, you've got an objective measurement of a particular contaminant. It's up or down or doesn't exist. It's subjective and easily identifiable.
I was just calling out, in the context of what Hans was saying, at least from my point of view, the desirability of including whether or not there is an adverse impact on the wetland itself.
Sure, but as you said, that would require not only some kind of a toxicologist or chemical analyst to make the determination as to up or down on the contaminant, if any. And then you'd have to have a environmental scientist come in and say, well, that really doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt. It's, benign.
That's my point. That's why I was saying earlier, it may remain the same, it may be adverse, or there may be an improvement.
Which is why I suggested that it have language in there on what we would need, or what would need to be done in terms of corrective action. So if there's a violation of the standard or whatever's established in the plan, that would assume that there's, if there's an exceedance of that, that would assume there's an impact to the wetland. And that's what would need to be corrected.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was my thought as well, Hans. That's the way I interpreted what you said. The difficulty here is we might price ourselves out here. I mean, these tests are not cheap. They should be done, certainly at a baseline and periodic monitoring, and event monitoring, I think, is particularly important. But if we're in there, I'll exaggerate, every week, doing more tests, I'm not sure that's going to advance the ball.
Yeah, and
No.
that's why I set the level that I did. 2.5 inches over a 24-hour period is a lot of rainfall. I mean, that's significant. We don't have that often. That's like a lot of rain. So, that's why I put the event base at where it is. And that the assumption is that would be at a level that would exceed the infiltration, the ability of the field to infiltrate, and that there would be an overflow at that point.
And plus the cost of monitoring and prevention is much smaller and manageable than the cost of cleaning up pollution after the fact, which might not even be possible.
Well, if we've got a monitoring plan in place, we should prevent that kind of destructive, catastrophic event that concerns you. I think we ought to be able to spot it through the monitoring program and stop it. I say immediately. There might be some delay, but it's certainly not going to be more than a week. If the testing is done, we get the results. What would prevent the Conservation Commission from saying there's time for an enforcement order, or it's a violation of the order of conditions, as Hans indicated? It's just that I think we're trying to look for a solution to a problem that hasn't existed yet. And as long as we're watching, we can be alert to that to prevent, because you were talking about a preventive mechanism, and that's a critical importance.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate what you said about cost. I mean, we're trying to protect the environment, so it's worth it. But I think there's an efficient way of doing that, and monitoring, I believe, is the appropriate mechanism. So what triggers the monitoring? That's all we're talking about, is how frequent is it going to be? Hans has suggested that it be done pre-construction or during construction, it's once a month. After that, it's per event. That's really what the issue is. Do we want to say something per event, but at least quarterly or semi-annually? Would that satisfy? Would that be splitting the difference, so to speak? Every event, and then every 6 months or 4 months, whether needed or not.
And just to add that last caveat, I would like to add opportunities for the commission to review and determine whether or not to continue. I don't, just as a practice, as somebody that's been doing this in the industry for a long time, that if you put things in perpetuity, it gets lost even more quickly in compliance. Not that that's fun, but I do believe that it should be, there should be interim timeframes where we review and make decisions on not only if we continue the sampling, or if we modify what the scope of the sampling is.
I agree, and this would be somewhat analogous to what's done with Milton Academy.
Yes. As well as the Granite Lakes.
Correct. So we have precedents that we would follow.
Well, except that we're talking about putting down material that we know is going to degrade over time. So I would think that it's more important to monitor as time goes by.
I'm not saying we stop, I'm saying that we have an opportunity to review and make a decision.
I think we're in agreement.
You can change the testing or whatever as you look at it.
After year 3, year 5.
Yeah,
Yeah, why don't we just put in language to be reviewed,
Once
set
you-
up a protocol and then to be reviewed after 3 years, 5 years, whatever.
My concern with that is that then we're going to be having this argument about cost. I think it's more prudent to plan for a worst case scenario for the most monitoring that we expect we would want to see. And then if we decide down the road that we don't need it, then we don't have to use it. But to ask for more later on is going to be very difficult.
So,
Okay.
so how would you word to fulfill that goal, how would you word the special condition?
I would say something like we would continue monitoring on a monthly basis, unless. No, I would just leave it at that.
Well, how
So
about
you're-
to be reviewed after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
So you're asking for monthly sampling, so a monthly collection of samples to be analyzed in a lab for the duration of the project, for the life of the project. So guessing two
you
locations.
you can't afford that. That'd be $2,000-3,000 a month.
About, yes.
A lot cheaper than remediation, Todd.
Now I don't know any project unless it's like a cleanup site that they do that kind of testing.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if there's some kind of,
I feel like this is a
midway.
cost of doing business and within the wetlands jurisdiction.
yeah, understood. I'm just looking for a mid-ground. There's a consensus clearly to provide for monitoring. There's a consensus clearly to provide for corrective action if there is an adverse impact determined. The only question seems to be whether or not it be done at a particular event only trigger, or whether or not it should be a sort of a timed sequential kind of monitoring. And that would go into how about scaling it down? Let's say that we start, and we're going to do it during the construction once a month. And let's say after we've got the certificate of compliance and we're up and running and the field is in use, we start with the first 3 months, then we go every other month, and then we slow it down to every 6 months and then annually, assuming that all the testing is consistently good and there is no adverse impact, to just have it trail off. I mean, that's I think a rational plan, and it would build the confidence that the system works. I'm not saying 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. I'm just saying as a concept. How about starting frequently and then slowing it down? Because it's going to be a big cost to the town. And if each one comes up perfectly, somebody's going to say, "Hey, how come we're spending whatever it is, $2,000 or $3,000 a month, when it comes out perfectly each time?" Is that concept? Can you live with that one, Wendy? Having it slow down over a period of time, assuming that the test results are appropriate.
No, John, because we know for a fact that the materials degrade over time. It's a moving target. I mean, I'm certainly open to revisiting it, but based on what we know today,
All right, so how about revisiting it then? How about, once a month for the first 6 months, or, maybe 1 year, and then review it as to how frequently?
And so just to clarify, Wendy, and I'm sorry, what are you looking to have sampled once a month?
I'm concerned about the temperature I'm concerned about the nanoplastics. I'm concerned about all the other pollutants that we've been talking about all along.
Understood. So if we didn't have a rainfall event in June, there's nothing to sample. I mean, there's no water being conveyed. There's nothing to analyze. And so that's kind of my question is, and that's why I put it as being event based, is because there has to be something to collect that would be brought to a lab to analyze. And so,
Yes, I understand your point, but also, you know, last summer was one of the driest summers that we have had in 100 years. And yet the Neponset River Watershed Association was still out there monitoring on their
So-
regular schedule.
they're monitoring the stream.
Yeah, because there's water in it.
Yeah, if there's no water coming from the field going out to the stream, there's nothing to sample. Otherwise, you're sampling the stream, but the stream, you're sampling multiple sources coming from wherever that's getting into the stream. So you need to sample at the source where the water is exiting the site.
So if there's no water that's running off of the site, then there's no testing that needs to be done. But I think that it's important that we still have that protocol in place, and that whoever it is that we're paying to do this monitoring is going to have it on their schedule, that they're going to be going out there and taking the sample. And if it's so dry that there's no water to sample, then we don't get charged for the lab fees that month. But I think that it's really critical that we have this schedule in place that's not going to be up for debate and negotiation and interpretation after every rainfall or significant event. You know, I think just for simplicity, it makes more sense to have it based on the calendar.
A question, if I may, Wendy, on the intervals for monitoring, would it make greater sense to have those intervals more collapsed as a turf field ages rather than upfront at the beginning of the experience? You're on mute, Wendy.
We can't hear you.
My apologies. I think it's just as important as the field ages as it is at the beginning.
Oh, I agree. But maybe even more important as it ages.
Yes, possibly. I guess time will tell.
Okay, so I think we get your position. I'm just still looking for a consensus. Tom, I don't see you, but do you have any comment on this issue? Can anybody see Tom? I don't know if he's.
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tom. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. My thought about this review of conditions is that it sort of takes a step that I'm not ready to take yet. What is that step? The step is the assumption that the project can be conditioned to protect the wetlands, and we're saying, well, what will those conditions be? I'm
Yeah,
not there yet.
Hypothetical,
And
Tom. It's just a way of
what's
framing
that?
the issue. It's just a way of framing the issue. It's a hypothetical, you know, can we do it with these conditions?
All right.
Can we make it better?
Well, I have some points I want to make, but they're not proposed conditions. They're instead they're sort of a review of the possible impacts. That's what I would like to talk about and tie in those impacts to some of the other decision-making bodies that have looked at this question. That's what I'd like to talk about. I don't know if you're ready to hear that now.
Sure, I mean, because that's what we're doing. We're seeing if there could be a consensus
All
around
right.
it as to, can it be done with these conditions? If not, then so saith.
All right. Can I share my screen?
Yes,
I just hit the share screen button. If somebody else is sharing, I guess. That person, I guess, has to get off.
I think Phil can make you co-chair.
All right,
it
I
sounds
hit the share
you go.
screen button. Can you see what I'm trying to share? I'm trying to share a page that says, can anyone see it?
No, we can't, Tom.
Well, I don't know why it won't let me do it, because I can see it, and I'm hitting the share screen button.
Tell us what it says.
All right, I'm going to select a window or screen here. Can you see it?
Not yet, but you're getting closer. It says Tom Palmer has started screen
There it
sharing.
is.
There you go. Got it. Okay.
All right, what do you see?
Planning Board, Town of Oak Bluffs.
Yeah, this is the decision of the first page of the decision, John, that you referred to. You said it was the Conservation Commission. It's not.
No, I said the Conservation Commission voted to approve it, 10-6. The Planning Board failed to carry the motion to approve it.
It wasn't. This is something different than the Conservation Commission. This is the Martha's Vineyard Commission. The Conservation Commission is a board of individual towns. This is a commission that oversees all 6 towns on the vineyard. And you see where it says DRI up top.
Yes.
That means development of regional impact. They review large projects on behalf of the entire island, and then transmit that finding. As you said, they voted 10-6 in favor to other boards that might be looking at it. So I just wanted to look at a couple of pages in this decision. So here's the next page we're looking at. Do you see the red arrows?
Yes. Well, I see
This,
yeah.
is, this is completely unrelated to the Wetlands Protection Act. This is a regional.
Not at all. Hey,
Tom,
you know, I've sat here for over an hour listening, and I'm going to talk a little bit. All right? Is that okay?
You're good to go.
All right. This is one of the findings of the Martha's Vineyard Commission. The commission finds that the proposed development would have a more adverse impact upon the environment in comparison to alternative manners of development. So here you find them agreeing that it's more damaging than, in this case, they're referring to a grass field. But they decided even though it was more damaging and had more adverse impact, they could still vote and approve it. Next page. All right, here they're speaking about water quality, including groundwater. And you see in the second red item, the project as a whole will impact water quality by introducing microplastics and potentially other contaminants into the environment, despite the applicant's offers to mitigate. Now, I would mention,
No,
John,
Tom, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. Were they talking
all
about,
right,
were they talking about drinking water?
yes, that's groundwater. And, I will get a little bit to that. I'm not arguing about that. I'm just saying, look what they said. Will impact water quality by introducing microplastics. Now, John, you said that the Tetra Tech report said there's not a problem with microplastics, but I don't believe that's the case. Although that was a word we used in our question, they never used it in any of their replies. And I think others have said they specifically didn't address it. At any rate, to go on, if you look at the red arrows, here they're estimating how many microplastics could come off a field. One estimate was 500 pounds per year. This is a field of about the same size, but it also has a track around it. And another estimate was 5 to 10% of the grass blades per year will be shed. So again, here's the commission, the Vineyard Commission, finding that water quality will be impacted by microplastics despite offers to mitigate. And those offers, if you look at the documents for this field, were similar to the ones we're talking about here, sumps and membranes and so forth. All right, next page. Here they're looking at another parameter with respect to ecology and habitat. The project will introduce microplastics and potentially other contaminants into the environment, which could affect wildlife, including fish. Now, that's an interesting comment because if you know the site where the Vineyard High School is, it's on the very top of the mound of sand that is the vineyard. And there is no wetland anywhere for over 3/4 of a mile. And the ocean itself is further distance. But they still felt that the microplastics could get all the way to those wetlands and coastal ponds and so forth and affect wildlife, fish and shellfish. Down below, they mentioned another parameter, climate change resilience, and they find that the field would be a source of heat in the area. Now, we have heard this from Grass for Guile, that these fields get quite hot. They can be 30 or 40 degrees higher than ambient temperatures. And we know that wetlands are very close to this field. And to me, it seems obvious that as this field heats up and rain hits it, the rain will cool off the field by absorbing the heat. And where will that rain go? Well, to the wetland, which is right there. All right, next slide. Here's something from the feds. This is the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And this is a sort of bombshell that came out after the Vineyard Commission ruled. And it said that the EPA has decided that there's no safe level of PFAS in drinking water. Again, drinking water, as you say, John, but wait a minute. We're supposed to protect habitat. Besides people drinking water, don't fish drink water? Don't aquatic organisms drink water? Is it going to be safer for them than it is for us? Now, I think something that Grass for Guile said early in this discussion is that the science in these matters is changing, and the regulated substances are changing and safe levels are changing. And the trend has been that we're learning that these PFAS in particular are quite dangerous. In fact, if you are trying to design a dangerous chemical, wouldn't you say, number one, I want it to be toxic at extremely small levels. Number two, I want it to be a so-called forever chemical, so it won't degrade. And that's true of these PFASs. All right, next slide. All right, here is the Oak Bluffs Planning Board. they decided 6 months after the Vineyard Commission on their own whether this field should be permitted. And as you say, John, they decided differently. They decided not to allow the field. Now, why did they not agree with the Vineyard Commission, who was okay with permitting it, even though it acknowledged the adverse impacts? Next slide. All right, this is a page from the Oak Bluffs Planning Board decision about why they felt the field could not be permitted. And here they are quoting a Tetra Tech report. And Tetra Tech says that leachable PFAS compounds were detected in 4 of the 5 components of the synthetic turf field. And these concentrations, they're also can be read as, they say nanograms per liter, but that means parts per trillion. So these are the same or equivalent to parts per trillion. And they say the highest concentration, that's 5 parts per trillion, were reported in the Brock fill. Now, John, earlier you said that Tetra Tech said that none of the components tested above the new 4 per trillion limit. But here's one that's above it right here. And later on, they go on to say, well, we can not only measure the concentrations, but in the field components, but we can estimate how many of them will come off in that year of average rainfall. That SPLP means synthetic precipitation levels. At any rate, somebody's talking. I'm going to stop.
Tom, can you hold on a minute? Everybody should go on mute. Otherwise, we won't be able to hear Tom. Thank you.
All right, I'll go on. Again, here's Tetra Tech report saying that we can estimate how many of these PFASs, which as we heard, have no safe level, will come off the field in a year, and they measure it in pounds. All right, here's another page. Next slide. Oh, went too far. Here's another page from the Oak Bluffs decision, and this was their finding. PFAS in the turf products will leach off into the water, in this case, stormwater, posing a hazard to the aquifer. Might be irrigation water anyway. They will get away in water. And that's a concern for them because they protect the aquifer. All the people in Martha's Vineyard drink groundwater, and there is only one aquifer because the island is mostly sand. And whatever well you're in, whichever well you use, it draws from the same level of water or accumulation of water in the sand. So this is the nut of the Oak Bluffs decision. They said, we feel that we can approve this field because the PFAS, the forever chemicals, will get into the groundwater, and that's the water we drink. So we don't feel confident that our drinking water is protected. Okay, here I'm going on. This is what we got from
Tom, I have a question for you.
Hold on, I'm not done yet, but I will listen.
Just have a question.
Who's speaking?
This is Hans.
Okay.
Did the Martha's Vineyard Commission deny the project?
No, and we already discussed
thank
that,
you.
didn't we? Yes, it was Oak Bluffs that denied the project for the reason that they felt that the PFAS were likely to get into the aquifer and create real problems for water service in public wells, because the wells would be contaminated with the PFAS, the water would be less safe, and it could be very expensive and difficult to continue to provide clean water. That's why they decided the way they did. Now, here's the cover of the letter we got October 4th from Tetra Tech saying that here's our answers to your questions. So, John, you quoted it earlier. I'm going to question number 1. The question was, will the presence of PFAS or PFAS in the proposed plastic materials adversely impact nearby Pine Tree Brook or BDW? And the answer was, our experience researching and testing synthetic turf systems suggests that PFAS are not a measurable component. Now, when I read this the first time, I thought, well, that's pretty significant. But this is the opposite of what they said here. The same Tetra Tech report says, well, no, there are compounds in the synthetic turf, and the highest of one of them was in the Brock fill. So which Tetra Tech do we believe? Do we believe that Tetra Tech, who told the commission that there are PFAS in this synthetic turf? Or do we believe the Tetra Tech that told us that there aren't? And that's my confusion. Not only are we getting different answers from various parties, but in the case of Tetra Tech, we're getting different answers from the same parties. Now let's go on to the second question. Too far again. Second question, if the contamination is probable, can it be quantified to compare the ambient levels of PFAS again? And once again, Tetra Tech says there is no PFAS in the turf system components, and contradicting the testing that they quoted to Oak Bluffs and Martha's Vineyard, and the testing that moved Oak Bluffs to deny the project because of PFAS. So you see where my confusion comes from. I feel like the experts we asked to give us answers are giving different answers than they gave to Martha's Vineyard and to Oak Bluffs. All right, now I'm going to take a different tack. I'm finishing up here. I just like to, we've been talking endlessly about turf. Now I'm a botanist and a naturalist, and I know that turf has a different definition than, say, grass that you plunk golf balls on, or grass that you fall on if you're playing sports. In botany, this is what turf means: an interwoven mat of rhizomes produced by certain members of the grass family. Now, this is a picture of turf that's been exposed by coastal erosion. Now, if you know what a rhizome is, you know it's a stem that goes underground, and that's most of what we're looking at here. These are rhizomes, these fat, whitish stems, and look how they have little breaks, little divisions. Those are called nodes, and out of those nodes come either roots or stems. You see lots of roots, those are the fine, hairy stuff, and you see some aerial stems, leafy stems, that are much thinner than the actual rhizomes. So let's show you a different kind of turf. Here is turf that I photoed Dorchester Bay, across from Malibu Beach, across Morrissey Boulevard. This is a saltwater cordgrass turf that forms in salt marshes, and you see how thick and dense it is, but you can also see the rhizomes, correct? The white things are the rhizomes, which are the underground stems, and the very fine items are the roots, which don't have the divisions. And incorporated in this mat are things like stones and sand and mud, and you see how tough and resilient this real turf is. It really is tough. It's hard to wash it away. Now, it's going on right now. It is being lost. in part because of sea level rise and so forth. At any rate, this is the kind of turf people have suggested we could have on the field instead of the synthetic turf. And what they have said is, with this turf, the sun makes it, it happens in place, it comes from the growth of plants.
You froze, Tom.
Including
Where'd you go? Uh-oh. What happened to Tom? Well, what? I don't see him. He may have disconnected. I suspect he'll be back shortly.
He's
Um,
still got a window there, but there's no, it just has his name,
Yeah.
no picture.
Tom, if you can hear us, you might want to unplug and then re-enter. And Sean or Philip, if you could keep your eye on the waiting room to make sure that if he does that, you let him right back in again. All right. Well, while he is not here and before he finishes up, do we have any other comments? Ingrid, do you have any thoughts? Going back to the issue of either incident-based monitoring or regular period of time interim monitoring. Do you have any thoughts on that? You're on mute, Ingrid. You're still on mute. Uh-oh. The wonders of our high-tech.
There we go.
There you
Yeah,
are.
I don't know
Okay.
why that, yeah, no further comments here. I'm not sure why that happened.
Okay, Todd, did you have any comments on that? You're still on mute, Todd, as well.
No, I don't have any.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody, yes.
John, you were just specifically asking for comments on the frequency of the monitoring? Or are you asking in general for comments on the?
Well, I was
special-
asking for comments on the monitoring, the frequency of the monitoring. That's just one subcomponent. I didn't mean that you may have other comments as well, Wendy. I didn't know if anybody else, Todd, Ingrid, Wendy, Hans, Tom, Arthur Doyle, anything else on the monitoring part of it, Arthur? I just want to see if we can come up with as great a consensus as we can get as to special conditions. And then we can vote up or down. I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody would be in agreement just because the special conditions were X, Y, or Z.
I mean, there were how many bullets on the special conditions? I mean, we're looking at 50 or so, and
You got it.
we're not even in agreement on one of them.
Yeah, that's not bad, actually, right? That's a definition of consensus. 49 out of 50. It's pretty good.
It's going to be a long night, John.
Arthur, anything that you could add, at least on the monitoring frequency?
I think we all concur about the need for monitoring. My only point was that the monitoring intervals might need to be closer as the proposed field ages rather than upfront. But I have no difficulty with the intervals being the same throughout, if that's indeed what the commission wants.
What about because of the fact the point that Wendy made and you made that as the field ages, it might become more appropriate for more frequent monitoring. So why not put it up for review after a year?
That's,
That good idea or bad idea?
no, I think having a phrase in there where the frequency of monitoring would be reviewed annually
Perfect.
would be fine.
Good. Wendy, is that livable for you?
Not necessarily. But
Okay.
I think it's important that the status quo be at least monthly. Because, if we fail to meet to discuss that particular point,
Right.
then what's going to happen to the monitoring program?
No,
You know, I'm a firm believer and we have to prepare and write into the plan the worst case scenario.
right. This is planning. You're 100% correct. I'm reacting perhaps to Hans's point that what happens if it doesn't rain? There's nothing to sample. And you're right. Maybe we can have somebody go out and look at it and say, hey, there's no water to sample, so no test this month.
So that month is cheaper.
Yes, you got it. All right. All right. So other issues. Wendy, do you want to address any of the other special conditions?
Well, yeah, a couple of things that did catch my attention. Hans, number 15 was about the invasives, and I believe the language that I heard you say was that the applicant may remove the invasives. In my mind, that means means will not. So I think it's important that we make it more definitive.
You're becoming
that,
cynical, Wendy. Is it what's going on?
unfortunately, this is not my first rodeo. So I would like it to be more definitive, saying something along the lines of the applicant shall remove the
Where
invasive.
though? Where do you want the invasives removed?
I'd love them all along the brook, but I suppose that would be asking too much.
Might be a little bit out of scope.
So my suggestion there would be to any areas of disturbance where disturbance is proposed or within the limit of work where invasives are present. Because otherwise we're asking the applicant or the town in this case to go into the no disturb zone or beyond the buffer, which you know, the intent of this permit is for them not to do that. So, I mean, I think invasive control should be limited to the limit of work.
Could you live with that, Wendy?
I suppose that's fair. However, I would like us to converse with the town at another time about a more robust plan for removing the invasives, particularly along Pine Tree Brook in that
Oh,
area.
I absolutely agree. It's incredibly problematic through there. But
Yes.
you know, this isn't the project to do that.
Fair enough.
All right. Anything else that any other comments on the 50 odd or 53 proposed special conditions?
58.
58?
Get the
I
number
don't
right.
have a further comment on those, but I do have an observation based upon multiple visits to the site. And it's a concern about the condition of the trail or trails adjacent to the wetland. They're not in particularly good condition. We have been seeing what is being done with the path around Turner's Pond. We approved that and allowed for additional work to be done at our most recent meeting. In observing it after rainfall, I worry about any premature discharge of waters from the wetland into Pine Tree Brook because of the condition of the trail. That it is gullied in several locations. And I just wanted to make sure that we were all cognizant of that.
But is that within the scope of this project, or is that like the invasive further down the trail?
That I don't have an answer for, John. I wanted to put it on the table to see what the thinking of the commission was, because it would seem that if we want the wetland to be functioning as we're intending, that if it is prematurely discharging water because of the poor condition of the trails, the gullying around the trails, are we suffering in one respect or another from what it is that we really want the wetlands to be doing in this instance? And the idea of the wetland would be harboring the water. But if the trails don't allow the wetland to harbor the water,
No, I understand what you're saying, and that would be within the scope if we're, if we're altering the mechanism by which the water gets into the wetland, then we could include, putting a berm there. But if you're talking about putting a handicap trail
No,
in
I'm
that
not.
area, that's a very, very expensive project.
It's
Worthwhile, but
it's
very
the
expensive.
former, in this instance, related directly to this project, not the latter.
All right, because we did see, I think Debbie Milbauer had showed some cell phone video of water crossing that trail. So maybe we could include a special condition that some kind of a berm, it would just be, part of a dirt berm. I don't think it's a huge expense item, but just a attention to detail item that would improve, as you said, harboring the water within the wetlands.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. Todd, just from a building, engineering, construction perspective, is that doable?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Good. All right, that might be something to consider adding as a special condition. All right, any other thoughts on special conditions? We still haven't seen Tom, right? Oh, no, you're back, Tom. Here you are.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'm sorry, my browser quit and had a hard time getting back. At any rate, I did say most of what I wanted to say. I just would like to finish by saying, what do we have to know in order to approve this project? In my view, we have to be comfortable saying to the abutters and residents along the brook that we believe that if we condition this project as we're proposing, it won't have these adverse impacts they're talking about. Number one, even though the field gets heated up a lot in the sun, and then sometimes it rains in the summer, we're comfortable that the rain falling on that superheated surface won't adversely impact not just the brook, but the wetlands that are right there. To me, it seems like that hot water is going to go in the wetlands. And yes, I'm not comfortable saying it won't adversely impact the aquatic life. Another thing we have to be able to say to ourselves is we have testimony that a lot of microplastics will come off this field. And we saw in the last hearing, Grass for Guile showed how this stuff floats away and gets away very easily and goes who knows where. So we saw that. We don't have to test for it. We know it's happening. And what we have to.
Tom, wasn't that crumb rubber?
Yes, but we have infill at this thing too. It's something different, might be lighter and even more mobile. At any rate, if we want to approve this, don't we have to be able to say to ourselves that we are comfortable that these microplastics, which are micro and might be small enough to get through all these membranes, we're comfortable that they're not going to escape and get into the wetlands. And I have to say, I haven't seen anything in the proposal that convinces me that plastics small enough to pass through these filters will not get in the wetlands. If I were to say that, I don't know how I would base that. And the third thing we have to say to ourselves and to the people who are asking us to protect the wetlands is that we're confident that the PFAS, the Tetra Tech, in its first go-round, pointed to as being in these materials tested by Alpha Analytical. They found a number of PFASs above detection limits and sometimes above reporting limits. We have to be confident in saying, well, we know that even if they get off of this field, we know they're in it, they're baked into it, they're manufactured to be in it. We're confident that as the field degrades and fritters away into little bits, that either they won't get into the wetlands, or if they do, carried by water when they become quite toxic, well, they won't have any adverse impact on the things that live in the water. Now, how can I say that? Where do I get the expertise to say that? I don't feel that I have it. Here is these forever chemicals that the EPA says has no safe levels. How can I say that the aquatic life in the wetlands right next to the field will not be harmed? I don't feel I can say that. So my question to you, and I would say that to all the commissioners, is how can you say that? How can you have that confidence that these harms won't occur? Because I think you have to have that confidence in order to support this project. Thanks.
Understood. All right, thank you. So Tom, I'm not being a wise guy, but it sounds like you would not support this motion to approve the field with any special conditions. Because what I'm
Well,
wondering about is there any special condition that you think is a good idea or not so good idea?
I like this testing, but the problem with the testing is it's happening after the project goes in. Wouldn't it be interesting to know, now that we already have 2 plastic fields above the brook, wouldn't it be interesting to know if these plastics are getting away and if these PFAS are getting away? So I would be comfortable approving a testing regime so we can approach these questions with a little more knowledge than we have. But I would not support waiting for the testing until, or making it a portion of an approval of the field. Because as I have said, and as you have assumed, I don't think we have got the information that can persuade me that these adverse impacts won't happen. I'm just not there yet. And I don't think, unless we feel that, unless we have that opinion that the adverse impacts won't happen, I don't get how we can approve the project.
Understood. There
Okay.
are some that may believe that we've got a scientific basis from our experts that say that there won't be micro shedding, and whatever might come off, could come off, hypothetically would come off, could be filtered out.
Well, I ask you to look at the Tetra Tech letter again, because they do not mention microplastics.
I did. But what
All
I'm
right.
suggesting to you is that there may be, based upon the advice that we got from the experts that we retained, to give us the confidence that you're asking for, as long as we do the monitoring and testing afterwards. And as Wendy said, that if we have some kind of a mechanism, I don't think it would always require cessation of activities there, but if we had a correction action plan required, that would be allow the field to go forward with care and under the custody and control, partly ours, because we'd have the right to step in with an enforcement order if things fell apart. But it would really go to the care and custody of the park department to keep control of those filters, to make sure that there is none. The flip side of that, you wait 10 years to figure out what's going to happen, then we'd never get there. If we had to wait 10 years to test it without having it in.
We could have real turf a lot sooner than that. I would just say that regarding finding out that the materials are getting away via testing means we have to talk about remediation, and that could be really expensive, and it'll be a lot cheaper to prevent the contamination before it happens, rather than have to consider how to do something about it once it's there. And I was convinced by my own observation of the existing plastic fields that whatever the town is doing to keep those materials on the fields has not been very effective. And as you know, early in this hearing, I tried to find out how those fields are drained and how they're mitigated and what is the pathways materials would take off the fields. And I didn't get very far with that because nobody seemed to know exactly what was going on with those fields. So
I
that's why I
understand.
don't have the, yeah. That's
I
why I
also
don't have
understand.
the confidence to say to the neighbors, I know these impacts won't happen. Now, you mentioned we have had expert, and I showed how Tetra Tech said two completely different things. They said there was no PFAS
We saw it,
in the
we saw
synthetic
it,
turf.
you showed it to us, you
Yeah,
gave us
all
the
right.
exhibit,
So,
we heard it. Okay,
so
we
I,
gotta move,
I'm just,
we gotta move forward.
okay, I just wanted to say that I feel like I can't hear you say that we have had Tetra Tech say there will be no PFAS when we've had them say that and that there will be PFAS. We've heard them say two things. All right. I'm sorry, John.
Understood. All right. Are there any more special conditions that people would like? Because we're going to come to a vote on this. And Tom's questions are appropriate because they say, do we have the confidence to rely upon the experts and the monitoring and corrective action plans to move forward with this? And that's really going to be the sum and substance of the vote. But before we get to that vote, I want to make sure that everybody weighs in on, are there other special conditions that would make it even better, provide more confidence that we're doing the right thing? Are there any other special conditions that anybody would like to add? I mean, I thank Hans. You put a lot of effort into coming up with 53 special conditions. So we're grateful for that.
I thought he did a good job.
I do too.
I think he did a great job. It's just that we really haven't had time to digest and review it thoroughly, except right here on the spot. And I would like the opportunity to go through it more carefully, look for more mays that could be replaced with shalls, for example. And there's some other things that are perhaps more lower hanging fruit, like the let's see, number 21, the item about lighting. I think that the current language, Hans, that you're suggesting is that the lights are turned off when the fields are not in use. I'm more concerned about the impact of the lights on wildlife in the wetlands, and so I would like the scheduling of the lights to be also dictated by things like migration patterns. And I believe that there are, other experts that we could refer to for specificity of what a good schedule for the lighting would be. But I'm guessing that in the spring and in the fall, during the migration seasons, that would be really important.
Are you talking about migration of birds or salamanders or everything?
Everything,
You're
everything,
talking
John.
about birds. Yeah, the city of Boston has a program for that. That might be useful.
Unfortunately, we've closed the hearing, and so adding new information, I think, is somewhat of a challenge.
No, I agree with that, but we can add any special condition we want. So it might be a lighting plan acceptable to the commission. I think we've done that successfully with Curry College. They've lighted up some of their parking lots, some of their fields, and I think that worked out to the benefit of the neighbors. So that all those downward dark sky approved lighting techniques. I actually think that's part of the plan as it is right now, that they have downward facing lights so that the neighbors aren't bothered from afar. And I think that's an important component to the plan, but I think it's already there. But we could make a special condition saying that the lighting plan as submitted by the applicant to be approved by the Conservation Commission. Although as stated, I think it's subject to approval because it is dark sky approved. In any event, I think I agree with Hans. The hearing's closed, and by the way, if we continued it again, you have to be careful because after you close the hearing, you get 21 days to vote. Otherwise, the permit issues. So that's special conditions are pretty important here, because if it's going to issue without our vote, I think we're better served to the public, to the neighbors, to the community, to make sure we've got the best special conditions available.
Unless
Again,
the
without
applicant
prejudging
agrees
what the
to an
vote is.
extension.
What's that?
Unless the applicant agrees to an extension.
That's true. But I think we've been at it since what, March?
Yeah, we can go around and around forever with this.
You got it. I
We
think it's
gotta
time
come to
for a
an
vote.
end.
All right. Are there any other suggested special conditions? I see none. And actually, I know everybody's been talking, and I just realized that at the very beginning, we didn't introduce ourselves as we customarily do. So it'll be a roll call vote anyway. So the public will know who's voting in which fashion. But unless I see anyone that wants further discussion, I would propose a motion to approve the plan to install the artificial turf field on the Lower Guile Road area with the special conditions, based upon the revised plans, that some of those revised plan revisions were proposed by our expert consultant, Tetra Tech. But based on those revised plans and with the 53 odd special conditions introduced by Hans and discussed and as amended tonight, I would propose that motion, and I'm asking if there is a second to issue. Todd has seconded the vote. Is there any further discussion among commission members? Okay, so
I would just say, John,
yeah.
that when I hear these votes called, I have to interpret them, if there are votes to approve this plan, that all the members who vote yes are confident that these adverse impacts will not happen. That's just a comment, not a question.
All right, comment noted. Arthur Doyle, sir, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hans Van Lingen, how do you vote? I didn't hear you on mute. I didn't hear you.
I vote yes.
Todd Hamilton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid, how do you vote?
I vote no.
And Wendy, how do you vote?
I also vote no, Mr. Chairman.
And Tom Palmer, how do you vote?
No.
And I, John Kiernan, vote yes. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor and 3 opposed. The motion carries. That's it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, commission members. It'll take a little bit to write this up, but a lot of it's going to be block and copy with the special conditions that have already been prepared by Hans. So I think we can move on to the next agenda item, which if somebody can help me.
There's a hand up.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Makashima
I
has his
see
hand
a
up.
hand up.
Oh, sure, Paul, go ahead.
John, I would feel like my Tuesday wasn't complete if I didn't get a chance to chat with you a little. But the question I have is really just procedural. Because I don't want to. When would we get a chance? When can we get a chance to get a copy of the order? When will the order come out? Do you have any idea?
Thanksgiving will slow us down a little bit. I don't know, and I don't want to put too much pressure on Philip, but he's the one that's going to have to actually write it. I don't think the special conditions are going to be particularly tricky because I saw Hans doing it. We could probably get it done by next, but we got to get everybody into town hall to sign it, not the town hall, but the DPW. So it could probably be done by Monday, but I should probably be safe and say Tuesday.
All right.
I have a question for Phil. Are you working tomorrow or are you tomorrow off?
No, I work tomorrow. We have Friday off.
Okay. I might stop by tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right, that'll speed it up, but the day off Friday will slow us down. But I still think we can do it by Tuesday, Paul. All right. So we had second on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes for July 13th, July 17th, I'm sorry, July 13th, 2021. July 17, 2023, September 14th, 21, December 10th, 22, and December 13th, 22. We talked about this several times and at different times at different locations. People had comments or didn't have comments. I'm comfortable with them to approve them. Is everybody prepared to vote on that tonight? Don't all speak at once. All right, Arthur, can you vote on that tonight?
Yes,
Or would
sir.
you like time to review?
No, sir, I've reviewed.
I'm sorry, could you say again, Arthur?
I have reviewed, Mr. Chairman, so I'm prepared to vote.
Okay, all right, good. Wendy,
Yes, I can vote.
Todd,
Yes.
Ingrid,
Yes, I reviewed them
Tom?
in the past and I'm ready to vote. Yes.
and Tom Palmer?
He's on mute.
You're still on mute, Tom.
Yes, I can vote.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes as written and assembled and given to us by Philip.
So moved,
Is
Mr.
there a
Chairman.
motion to approve? Arthur, yes?
Yes, so
Is there a
moved.
second?
Second.
Second, thanks, Hans. Any discussion? All in favor, we'll do it voice vote. Just go across the top. Arthur, how do you vote?
Yes,
Hans, how do you vote?
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes,
Todd,
Yes.
Ingrid,
Yes.
Tom? Is he frozen again? No, there you go. All right.
Yes, I vote yes.
Oh, good, thank you. And I, John Kieran, vote yes as well. Thank you very much. Any additional business? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Todd, motion to adjourn, second? Tom Palmer, you adjourn? Is that a second, Tom?
I just want to mention, has anybody seen the beavers in Turner's Pond?
Seen the what?
Beavers. There's beavers in Turner's Pond, supposedly.
Really? Wow, no,
Yes,
I haven't.
true.
That's pretty good.
All right.
Which-
Well,
which
thought
side,
somebody had
Tom?
seen them.
Which side? I run around.
I
there
don't
quite a bit.
know. I
Okay.
don't know. But they're supposedly young and they've been there like 2 weeks.
Well, that's great news.
Ingrid, don't worry, you're a fast runner.
We'll see.
All right, all in favor, say aye to adjourn. Aye.
aye.
Unanimous. All right, thank you. Good night. God bless.
night.